Okay, so I'd like to share some important information with you before getting started. The first is this webinar is going live on Facebook, so it's being streamed there. So if something goes awry during the session, make sure you go to your Facebook and access Disal's page over there, because you can watch it there too. My second information is this webinar is being recorded and will be available on Disal's channel on YouTube later. And in order for you to get your certificate, please send an email to Disal, and their email address is eventos@disal.com.br. This is something super important, making sure you have this information. And finally, more than 1,000 people registered for this webinar. That is super impressive. And I want you to know that I feel so flattered by it, which absolutely makes me think of all these challenges we've been facing over the past few weeks. And in a very simple, but a very honest way, I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of you teachers who are still going this extra mile for all of your students. You guys are just amazing. I believe, and I will always believe, that teachers play this essential role in everyone's life. And I want each and every one of you to know how much you guys mean. I want you to know that you guys rock big time, like you mean the world. And thank you so much for being here with me. So let me introduce myself. My name is Rafael, and I work as an academic consultant for Cambridge University Press. I'm based here in São Paulo. I also want you to know that I feel so thrilled and flattered, so happy by this invitation. So my super special thanks to Disal, in specific and especially to Lydica, Henrique, and Jessica, who kindly helped me get all the things ready for this session. So thank you so much for it and for your help. And I'm here today to talk to you about how to integrate technology into your lessons. And fingers crossed, hopefully, do it like a boss. So this is my agenda, and I'm going to start with some of my assumptions and thoughts on this tech world. And for doing so, I'm going to present to you a bit of a tech history through a timeline that I prepared. After that, we're going to move on and discuss how technology is used in the modern days. My third topic is an analysis of an activity that I had the opportunity to deliver for a secondary class here in São Paulo. Actually, this class was delivered last year, way before this coronavirus crisis and everything that we've been through. And I decided on keeping this because this is an activity that potentially you guys can take advantage in using in your class when you're back to normal, you know. And to finish, I want to talk to you about some common sense guidelines and how to get the best and the most out of this technology, you know, and potentially also some tools available to inspire you go beyond. And during some tech tools examples, I hope to give you and provide you some help with some digital tools to support you during this moment. So let's go. Due to all the situation involving the coronavirus, I've heard lots of people discussing the role of technology and actually the role technology has to play at this moment. One of the frequent topics revolves around the possible full integration of tech in the schools, even replacing the face-to-face classes and interactions. That's something that I hear a lot of people discussing, you know? And to be very much honest with you, and in my opinion, I think technology plays and will always play an important part in our educational context, but it will never replace the human interaction. That's pretty much what I think, you know? And tech tools are not able to actually look me in the eyes and generally relate to the way that I feel. They try, but they're not able to do such a thing, not in a way that a human do. And by saying so, I'd like to present to you some of my own thoughts on this technology and tools, devices, and world, you know? But in order for us to talk more about it, we have to understand how tech tools ended up being how they are and what they are now. And as you know, so much has happened and evolved over the years in this topic and this matter. Computer technology, let's say, as it is best known, and people usually relate technology to computer, it started to develop in the 50s. But there are so many other things that happened before that. And in my opinion, all those things must be discussed and analyzed as well. So that's why I'm going to conduct you guys through this beautiful timeline. I hope you liked it, that I prepared. And I want you to reflect on how tech has been advanced over the years. But most importantly, how it turned out to be what it is now. So let's go. The best way of going about this is to actually understand what technology means. And according to the Cambridge Advanced Learners Dictionary, it means knowledge, equipment, and methods that are used in science and industry. And think with me, if we take both this relation between knowledge and equipment, and also science and industry, we can then infer it refers to this relation between human and machine. So there is a human playing an important part here, not only the machine. Having said that, I mean that the human also plays a role here. And by saying so, technology then expands human senses as means of a language. Tech uses some sort of equipment to communicate something, which leads me to understand that, in other words, human being is the one who has access to reality through ways of mediation. So we pretty much understand that we make part of a reality and that there is a reality through a way of a mediation. And we do so because we are beings that indeed use the language. And by saying language, I don't mean English, Portuguese, or whatever other language that might cross your mind, But I mean, when I say language here, I mean all the different systems of communication used to convey messages. Things like sound, not only the sounds that we're able to produce, of course, but also graphics, gestures, conventional signs, and all the other things. And in this sense, if you allow me to open a very quick parenthesis here, nós somos seres de linguagem, and that is the point that I want to get. In order to illustrate that, I'd like to present to you guys a very interesting idea that Professor Lúcia Santaella elaborates on this relation between technology and human being. I had this awesome and great privilege of attending some of her classes back in college. And Lúcia Santaella is like this strong and powerful woman in the tech world. And I feel so much inspired by the work she does. And according to Santaella, humans are already on a tech tool in their bodies. And that is what we call the speech organs. Super interesting idea. I have a bit of a confession to make, actually. The first thing that I came across this idea, I was actually astonished by it. Never had I thought about this before, but giving some more thinking on this idea, I think that is just an amazing, because she says, according to Santaella, she says that speech device is told functions of both breathing and swallowing for the speaking act to happen. So that's pretty much of a good technology, an awesome technology, And that would be the very first tech apparatus as we access the speaking to access the reality and expand our senses. So that's pretty much what Santaella says, and that's the idea she elaborates. My first topic, it's that this idea, she elaborates, is also supported by the Lacanian idea that in language that is always addressed to the other, to someone else, that the subject finds himself in existence. So by recognizing there is another person, I recognize that I exist. And that is something super important because language is understood here as a symbolic order that structures the individual. And as I quote Lacan here, the man who was born into existence does first with the language. And that is something super important, we know, and that supports her idea. Moving on, if we take everything that I have said so far into account, then there has never been educational contexts that were not mediated by some sort of technology, even by using this so very familiar chalkboard, you know? So when you think of tech, you absolutely think it like automatically think of something digital nowadays. But have you ever thought it could also be some sort of technology, like the chalkboard could also be some sort of technology? So that's a very interesting idea as well. Let's now analyze and remember some other stages in history that conducted us to this current situation of technology advance and acceleration. If I had to summarize, also because I have like this time limit for this webinar, I would point only 4 stages in the technology evolution. So the first, please follow with me. The first is the speaking act. Because if there wasn't a language, technology would not exist. Not only technology, but also many other things that we have in our society nowadays, especially all the content and all the culture that is being produced, we know? So, and by saying the speaking act is a super important thing in the technology advance, have you ever stopped yourself to wonder how amazing the speak act really is? Like, I mean, even concerning all the biological context that we're on, all the muscles that you got in the face that help us produce the sounds and align the breathing with the speaking. So it's pretty much like you have a super control of your breathing while you're speaking. And even the fine motor skills that we're on, that's just something amazing. Having this ability to actually speak is pretty much what makes us different from the other living beings. Being able to speak has then developed something that we call the consciousness, and that is what sets us apart from the other living beings. And that's why this is something also super important. My second stage in the tech evolution that I would love to talk to you about, it's on the writing act. So scholars generally agree that the earliest form of writing appeared almost, let's say, 5,500 years ago in Mesopotamia. Early pictorial signs were gradually substituted by a more complex system of characters representing the sounds of the Sumerian. And by saying Sumerian, I mean the language, right? That is actually believed to be the very first written system in the world. So writing is super important here in this sense, not only because of its natural evolution from the ability to speak, but also because it somehow leads us to my third stage and the process of understanding this so fast development of technology. And my third would be the printing press, where the language could finally then be printed in a process of having text and images transferred to a paper or some other material by means of ink. And of course, there's like no way of talking about the printing press and not to think of the Gutenberg galaxy. So that's a reference that I have to make. And printed materials like books, bulletins, and even the newspapers, they were used to share ideas in a very quick and efficient way for many different purposes, you know, with the intention of informing a very large number of people. And the printing press lasted for 4 centuries. So that's something massive. And finally, my stage number 4, which has to deal with the Industrial Revolution and the mass communication. So Industrial Revolution, like this period in which the development of machinery led to major changes in the whole industry. And also the mass communication allowing a message to be communicated to a large number of people at the same time. And of course, I have to mention here the telecommunication and more recently, the internet, right? Back then, the word media was used to describe it all these means of communication and information systems. I'm sure that you hear a lot the word media, and I love this word not only because this is my second graduation, but also because media has evolved a lot together with the technology, because back then we used to think of media as those telecommunication systems, and nowadays all the communication mediated by a computer was later defined as the new media. So media has sort of evolved. And of course, I have to quote here Levi Manovich and his work on the language of new media. Moving on and bearing all this info in the back of our heads. So according to McLuhan, technology is an extension of the human being. And by saying so, I'd like to present to you two interesting ideas. So, machines as an extension of our bodies, and digital technology as an extension of our brains. And what I can conclude is, if tech is somehow an extension of us, no matter how that is, if it's like a machine related to your body or a digital tech tool related to your brain, it is also an extension of our intelligence as a result. And fighting against technology is indeed the same as fighting against the development of the human intelligence itself. So this is something super important here. Moving on, all that I have said led us to better understand how technology is faced nowadays. And I personally love this sentence that we got here in this slide. I design and develop experiences that make people's lives simple. I love this word design, but not designing meaning this relation to the enjoyment and the study of the beauty, which is actually what most people think of when designing crosses our mind. But I mean design in the sense of a project, you know? All this planning that we have involved in making something for a very particular purpose. That is how we start thinking of tech tools as a way of getting things done in a very simple and in a super faster way. All the today's practicalities, you know, the things that we do on a daily basis. That's why I bring you guys this sentence, this definition. So nowadays, tech could also be conceived as the application of scientific knowledge to the practical aims of human life. Because there is a sense of technology has evolved so much to the practicalities of the things that we do on a daily basis, helping us not only getting the things done in a simple way, but in a much faster way, you know? And this is something also, something meaningful. So I said everything, like all those pieces of information, because I want you guys to think of how tech has advanced over the years. So technology in the modern world often revolves around the so-known words like apps, virtual reality, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and even the augmented reality, you know? I'm sure most of you guys hear these words often on a daily basis, as much as I do. This whole context of interactions with technologies makes men reinvent life and determine a different nature for the humankind. And this is pretty much of what we call in the modern world in relation to the technology context, the post-human. So, unfortunately, I don't have time to address you to the post-human topic, but in a nutshell, some of the discussions on it is on the human body's transformations through different types of technology. So it's pretty much like how technology is helping us to be integrated more in our bodies also, you know? And a very good example of this post-human discussion can actually be found in this amazing series called Black Mirror. I'm sure most of you guys know this, and I hope you like this as much as I do. But if you don't know this yet, in a nutshell also, the series tackles basically key issues of the contemporary society shaped by, let's say, this rise of new technologies, media, and even the extensions of man. We know that I mentioned McLuhan when he says technology is an extension of the man, either something physical or something digital in relation to our intelligence. So this is a very good series. If you haven't watched this so far, give it a go. It's amazing, and I'm sure you're going to like it. But my second topic here to talk to you about on the modern world, it's, although I can think of many topics related to the modern world, I'd like to draw attention to just 3 points on the use of tech nowadays. So the first, computer literacy and verbal literacy. The second, interactive technology. And the third, companies seeking digital transformation. So the first thing to mention is computer literacy and verbal literacy. So today's kids grow up immersed in these new technologies. They are absolutely surrounded by computers, video games, all these audio and video streaming platforms, the social media, as we like to call them, and all the other tools that we have in the digital age. That's why we understand their visual and their digital literacy happens so much earlier than their verbal literacy, you know? By the time they start, those new kids start learning how to read and write, they already know how to tackle different digital tools, sometimes even better than us, let's say. And I would say some of my students do it so much better than I do. And according to Prensky, our students have changed it radically. Today's students are no longer the people our educational system was designed to teach, according to him. And due to this tech and digital reality, today's students think and process information fundamentally different from their predecessors, you know, from the students before. Also because different experiences lead to different brain instructions, like their thinking patterns have changed. That's why I have to say, and Prensky here, and Prensky here calls these new students the digital natives, meaning they are all native speakers of the digital language of computers, video games, and the internet, you know? And those of us who are not born into the digital world but have adopted many or most, let's say, of the technology nowadays, we are called digital immigrants. As I have presented so far, some of my own beliefs to think of tech revolves around 3 topics. The first, it helps us get our things done in a more efficient and faster way. The second, it extends and advances our human potential to a whole new level. And the third, and finally my third, which is a very personal idea, I have to say, keep and expand the human connection. That's why I'd also like to talk to you about interaction. While some people think online interaction suggests that interactivity takes place between human and machine, I myself believe that in the educational context, interactivity happens between human, and this is mediated by a machine, you know? So my first topic to talk about is, this is supported by the Moorhead idea that in educational theory, interactivity has been defined more broadly as communication, participation, and feedback. So feedback it is something important in face-to-face interaction. Imagine how important feedback is in online classes, you know? So that is something super important to bear in mind. And recognizing that teaching involves far more complex interactions than are possible in a human-machine experience is something that we gotta do. My second point here, I promise my theory is just about to stop, I promise. My second point here is the online interaction topic. Is that participation in online discussions, you know? Whether in real time or not, I think online discussions give us an opportunity for providing a permanent record of one's thoughts for later students' reflection and debate. And that is also supported by Chain and Lowy, allowing learners to have some time to think deeper about a topic and, let's say, respond when they feel more informed and inspired, you know? And my third and final point here, the fact that companies are seeking for digital transformation. So during the school years, students learn a bunch of different things. And this should not only be focused on preparing them for their academic life, let's say, in advance in their studies, but also for what they will face when finding a new job, going out there in the real world, fostering their careers, and actually becoming a citizen who plays his part in a society. So the so-known 21st century skills refer to these core competences that schools need to teach in order to help students thrive in today's world. And of course, one of the competences is the technology literacy, and it is pretty much of our responsibility to help students develop it. At Cambridge, we understand that the engaging and collaborative nature of the language classroom, let's say, is just the perfect place to develop and embed these qualities. That is why we created something that we called the CAMFLIC, the Cambridge Life Competences Framework. So the framework outlines 6 key areas of competency that are important for development: creative thinking, critical thinking, learning to learn, communication, collaboration, and social responsibility. These competency areas are linked to 3 foundation layers. So the first is emotional development, the second is subject knowledge, and the third, digital literacy. So if you want to learn more about it, I think this website is worth a visit. Make sure you access cambridge.org/CLCF. You will find lots of brochures over there focused on each of the key areas for you, and this is free. Having provided you with some theory, not some theory, but a lot of theory, sorry, but that was important to make you guys understand what my intentions are for my activity. And also some of my own beliefs on technology, you know? I hope I've been able to answer some important questions to make us think of how technology has evolved and how technology could be thought in a wider way. Questions like how technology started, its origin, and where we are going with it, you know? And so far, these are some of my thoughts to lead you guys to think of it. So the first, people play an important part as tech help us to expand the human connection. When I quote Lacan and Santaella. My second point is interaction is something super important, especially in educational technology context, this edtech context, as it expands the human potential to a whole new level, as I quote McLuhan. And finally, my third topic, technology acceleration is surely a reality, and the necessity to adapt is even more real, like this idea of getting things done in a more efficient and faster way. And by saying so, we talked about this digital revolution, making reference to Lev Ivanovich, you know, and all the design. Moving on, let's say something very practical now and let some of this theory aside. I'd like to present to you a class that I had the opportunity to deliver. Last year, I was actually kindly invited to teach secondary students in a school here in São Paulo. But the school coordination gave me some very, let's say, specific instructions on what was expected to be delivered as the lesson objectives for the class. And some of my initial objectives to create this activity in class were: they wanted the students to use English to access information and build up their knowledge. A cultural aspect should be included. I also had to think of a very hands-on practice. And finally, of course, I had to give it a personal touch of my own. That's when I thought, why not integrate some technology? And after giving some thought to it and reflecting on my aims, I created this activity that I'd like to share with you now. It is super important to highlight beforehand two things, though. First of all, I was not their teacher nor worked for that institution, and that means I had some very limited time to work with them. And I had to think of an activity that would not take much time. And my second point is, I thought about sharing this specific activity with you guys because tech here was integrated in a very simple way, allowing you to apply the same to your teaching context if you want in the future. And also because I had some logistic limitations on the use of more advanced tech tools. So I thought about creating an activity that would introduce, first, some British characteristics on the mysterious world by using Sherlock Holmes as a guiding thread. And I have to say that please notice this introductory mention to Mr. Holmes only serves to justify this investigative work that I wanted students to do, that I expected them to do. The second point is I provided students with two mysteries related to real stories. In a way, they needed to do some research, learn more about it, learn like everything that surrounds these mysteries, and later on create their own narratives of how this story is unfolded. And finally, after collecting real data and filter it by relevance, in order for students to create their own narratives, they then were asked to create their own board games with their defined narratives, you know? So I basically gave them stories. They needed to do some research, and based on these real stories, they were to create a real board game for them to play. So these are some of the slides that I used with the students. I'd like to show you guys the way that I presented it to them. This first slide is how I named my activity. So Unsolved Mysteries, Transforming British Iconic Stories into Board Games. My second slide, I wanted to talk to them about Mr. Holmes with the intention of justifying this investigative work they were expected to do. So they would be Mr. Holmes at least for an hour, let's say, with me, in like doing things like looking for more information, for example, finding out what is true and what is not, understand how things happened, and place these facts into a very logical timeline, you know? That's pretty much what I wanted them to do. And my third slide, which is the one that I like the best, actually. I presented them real stories and introduced the mystery that surrounded these stories. So the first story was focused on Queen Elizabeth I, the Queen of England, and the second one was actually related to something in the story of Diana, the Princess of Wales, you know? And before presenting the mystery, I highlighted some very specific information that I wanted them to focus in order to guide their further research, you know, and also check it on their prior knowledge that they have it on the topic. So my slide number 4 was when I presented what I wanted them to do with the information they had collected previously. So basically, I wanted them to transform the stories into a real board game, as I told you previously. my next slide is an important checking moment for me as a teacher, because I wanted to make sure they were really in the right path and we were in the same page. And by doing so, I sort of ordered stages in which I wanted them to go through. Like the first one, I want you guys to do some research and learn more about the story. The second step, after doing the first, you are going to select some key information, and after that, create your own narrative out of the selected items, and finally, put them all into the creation of your own board game, you know? So, and finally, my last slide. That's when I divided the class into 2 groups, because obviously I had 2 activities here, and finally provided them with what I called the classified files. So Elizabeth's classified files and Diana classified files, you know? These files were actually placed in a cloud in advance, and inside of each folder, the students found very specific documents that I previously selected for their research. And I have to mention in this moment, I did it because I wanted to keep their investigative work in a very controlled way. So maybe if they were out in the, if I let them to go out on the web and do the research on their own, they would probably get distracted and lose focus, you know? So that's why I decided to sort of create this classified file and upload this to a cloud and share this specific cloud as a way of a research for them, you know? So students could either use their cell phones, scan their QR code that I showed, and just go for the folder, or use a link that I also created associated with the folders, of course. It is super important to remember that while students were doing their research, I was actually monitoring their prediction, you know, and putting them back on track when needed. I think, and in my opinion, time is something super real, and we needed to be very much focused. So in this cloud, as I mentioned before, I uploaded some very specific files, you know, so students could have access to an animated video that brought some conspiracy theories about Diana's life, which is something that I did it on purpose, I have to say, and also to provoke students to further research and reach a conclusion on their own. The second thing was a PDF with illustrations and information extracted from the Royal Encyclopedia. If you want more information about it, we can extract this from the website royal.uk. I also gave them some very real TV news, mainly the ones on Diana's death, because we had this conspiracy theories. And finally, the third, which was a family tree chart for them to better understand the role each one plays in the royal family. And I also have to say, because I uploaded this file because I also wanted them to make some proper connections, you know? So I wanted to make sure the 4 C's framework were incorporated, all the framework was actually incorporated, but the 4 C's, each one of them were incorporated into this class. So in collaboration, for example, I wanted them to help one another put their ideas across and identify the roles and tasks each one of them had to do. In communication, I wanted them to develop a clear narrative with a very logical sequence of facts, focused on their research, you know, also by expressing their opinions and their thoughts. In creativity, I wanted them to respond to historical events in the creation of a real board game. And finally, in critical thinking, which is here cognition also, I wanted them to compare points from many different sources and distinguish between what is a fact and what is an opinion, you know? So I pretty much wanted them to go from lots, lower order thinking skills, all the way to HOTS, higher order thinking skills, and use lots skills like comparing, contrasting, and even sequencing, focusing on the things and the research. And using this as a basis to go to HOTS and elaborating more cognitive abilities like giving your opinion, seeing the big picture, arguing, seeing the differences, and stating all those things, you know? So that's why some critical thinking is something really important here in this sense for me. There are two photographs of how the board game turned out to be that I would like to show you. So in this slide, as you can see, so that's basically the UK's name, the UK's map, sorry, and students were placing red sticker on very specific places. Not sure if you can see, but in this map, like that are not only cities, but also sometimes even a country, we know. So students also created some cards for each sticker, like in relation to each place, each sticker. And these cards were questions for the player to answer in order to advance in the game. I'd like to show you an example that I extracted from one of the groups. This is a real example, and the question they made was, what's the relation between Diana and Wales? I even noticed this specific group of students, they created a path for the game, and in a very good way, they sort of connected one question to the other. Let's take this as an example. So the right answer here for this question, what's the relation between Diana and Wales, is letter B, also known as Princess of Wales after marriage. So the word marriage, as I highlighted now, is the word responsible for leading the player to the next step. So students needed to know where Diana married in order to advance in the game and sort of go for the next place, you know? So only by knowing she married in London, the student and the player would then be able to go to the next place and go to the next sticker, which is London, that we also have like the red sticker here in the map. Hope you guys can see this. And by using some information they collected in one place to guide you through your next place, I very much thought of Carmen Sandiego, right? I guess they didn't know this, but I very much thought about Carmen Sandiego. Did you guys used to play this game? Because I used to love Carmen Sandiego. I used to play this like for a long time. So moving on, as I highlighted in the previous slides, unfortunately I had some very limited time to work with them, and technology had to be integrated in a very simple way due to the limitations. But I can actually think of many other ways of teaching the same classes, delivering the same activity. For example, instead of using a printed board game, why not create a digital game and use Minecraft to design your own digital board scenery and have all of your digital game done, you know? That's super interesting and super fun to be done, especially during this COVID-19 situation, where students can absolutely interact with one another, have fun, and absolutely create their own digital games with some serious and pedagogical intentions linked to it, you know? So, and that leads me to my next slide, which is focused on some common sense guidelines on how to use tech to its best advantage. So, in my opinion, using technology just for the sake of having it makes no sense if not very well integrated into your lesson plan. That's why I was taking some very serious thought on what should I tell you guys on how to take the technology to its best advantage. And I came up with some common sense guidelines that could potentially help you guys do so. So my very first advice would be, the way technology teaches is, in my opinion, as meaningful what is being taught. So whenever possible, try to make smart choices about what you're going to be using in the classroom. Think about programs and digital tools, let's say, that really encourage and push your kids to create something, solve real problems, and absolutely develop a number of important abilities. All these abilities that we have mentioned so far, we know. Try to avoid software that relies so much on drill and repetition, for example, because I absolutely think the way this kid, the way that your student interacts with technology has to be as meaningful as your teaching objectives and as meaningful as your teaching goals. So my number 2 tip would be look for technology tools that let students not only learn from themselves, but also from each other. So in this sense, it's just like making sure to use a tool that absolutely makes the students reflect on their production. Like, I have to analyze what I did, maybe discuss, maybe understand the way that I did it, or how I did it, or perhaps if I could have done this some other way, we know. It's not only important to find and explore your own way of learning things, according to the way that I think, but also sharing with the other peers. And I have like this very important aspect of sharing, which is like, by being different, we can absolutely take great advantage of the things that I do best and integrate with the things that you do best. And finally take things work to a whole new level. And that would be something super cool to do, you know? The third, very simple tip would be give students some space to nurture their own interests. So learning, being willing and being aware students, being willing to learn from them and being aware they have their own things they like, the things they dislike, and the things they super appreciate doing is something also super meaningful for our classes. So why not letting them choose the way they would like to deliver as an activity? I mean, by using something that is super meaningful for them, students could potentially genuinely relate to and probably do this activity in a so much better way. So why not also listening to them and use their contributions to something that we do on a daily basis in the classroom. So number 4 is, instead of prohibiting phones or social media, try to think of smart ways to use them. And by saying so, I'd like to illustrate only this tip with a real example. So I'm sure you guys have already heard it of this TikTok word somehow, but in case you haven't, TikTok is a platform, a video platform actually. It is a super trendy app that students are going through nowadays and everyone is sort of addicted, that helps students and all these learners to create, shoot, edit, short videos. They are usually 15-second videos, but some of the videos could be a little longer. And they could not only produce the videos and shoot, but also add up some filters, music, animation, and even those all those kinds of special effects, you know? So I am going to show you just one very simple example of a common video. I want you to understand how these videos are produced. It's super fast. Let's see.
3, 2, 1, level up, 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 level up. All this on me so yummy, all this sauce so yummy. No, you want this yummy, yummy, all yummy, yummy.
Okay, as you can see, like in this example, we have like this beautiful dog just jump in the piles of pillows. And then we have like this song, level up, and the challenge is getting harder as he jumps more and more piles, you know? This is just a very simple example, super silly, but just to illustrate how this works, and students just love this TikTok. And taking this as an example, I would also like to show you a more serious example of a TikTok video that was produced by UNICEF. You know, UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. And although this is a super simple video, as I mentioned, we can see rather a difference in purpose of its creation. So it's a super quick tip on the coronavirus. So let's see. Okay, super simple, where you have like this question: where can you find the facts about coronavirus? There's this Bruno Mars song where he says, stop and wait a minute. And then the girl really actually stops. She sort of waits a minute, and then she gives the answers that it's written on her blouse. So this is another example of a more serious purpose of using a so known and loved video platform as TikTok. But I'd like actually to show you guys this third example, which is a very good one, also produced by UNICEF, you know, showing the routine of a girl during the quarantine. Let's see.
Walking the park, hanging out with my friends, or spending time in cafe is something unavailable during quarantine, but is not a reason to be upset. Quarantine is a good opportunity to learn something new. During the day, I do exercise, acquire new habits, do distance studying, read books, learn how to cook, play musical instruments, draw, and communicate with my friends by a video link.
Okay, this is a very good example of how students could use their language production associated to the creation of a super informal video like a TikTok one. And please let me know if you become a TikToker in the future, because I would love to hear more information about it, you know? Let's move on. So this is a very good example, like this TikTok, of how this so fun social media platform can be used with some very serious intentions, as I said. And finally, my tip number 5, which is the very last one, that something boring on paper is still going to be boring if just replaced by a cell phone or a laptop. And as an example, I'd like to say something. Instead of using, let's say, instead of using digital illustration of different shapes when teaching maths, why not coming up with some augmented reality tool to teach spatial reasoning in geometry? So that would be something super cool to do, you know? Okay, having said that, I'd like to illustrate illustrate everything I have said so far by giving you and providing you guys some tech tools as an example itself. So let's go for the first. There is this screen app. This is on an online screen recorder. This is a super interesting tool to use. You can screen record your desktop for free, and the best, in my opinion, without having to install anything to your computer, because this is a 100% online tool. And the only thing that I have to say is, in light of the recent situation due to the COVID-19 crisis and the high demand, records were temporarily limited to a 15-minute video, but in my opinion, it's also cool. My second example is the Blackboard Collaborate. Blackboard Collaborate is both a virtual classroom for your online teaching and also a web conferencing tool. So it's pretty much like having two things in the same place. So you can either use as one tool or the other. You can create mobile-friendly flipped lessons and use the interactive whiteboard, the web conferencing tool, and you can also share the students in different groups for a project discussion, let's say, for example, and visit the group to check it on their progress, you know? That's something super cool. My third example would be the PlanBot. So if you like organization, this one is absolutely for you, as it is for me. So PlanBoard helps you plan your lessons, align to curriculum, many different types of curriculum sets, and manage your schedule in a very easy way. You can actually create all your lessons using the online editor this PlanBoard has, and add in attachments, photographs, and even videos to support your lessons. Something super cool. My example number 4 is Padlet. I'm sure most of you know that. I decided to keep Padlet on my list just because this is a super cool thing. And also in case some of the teachers didn't have the chance of using Padlet before. So if you scan this QR code, you will be directed to a very nice video explaining 10 good classroom uses for Padlet. I decided to put this QR code over here just because I noticed lots of teachers are actually using Padlet, but they are lacking on mastering and take this to its best advantage. So I think it's a very interesting video to watch later on. My example number 5, it's actually an app. So the Cyber Chase Shape Quest app. And I have to tell you that I surprisingly came across this game when I was in charge of delivering a training session on mathematics. And I had to add this to my list. That's why I decided to add this to this list. Cyber Chase is a free app from the PBS network in America, and it's related to the stories of its series. So the stories follows a group of children who help a motherboard to protect the cyberspace from what they call the hacker, you know? This app is super interesting because it offers 3 games that all work on areas of maths, like geometry, shape, space, and even measure. And it is also an augmented reality game. It is available on iPad, Android, and Kindle Fire. So my example number 6 is Cargo Boot app. Cargo Boot is a game where kids have to sort of, let's say, direct a robotic arm to move crates to a very specific and designed spot. So the goal is actually to compose a code that makes the robot carry the boxes in the most efficient way. Let's say it's pretty much like this. So students are actually asked to learn some programming concepts using Cargo Boot. And in my opinion, this is a very good introduction for when later in their lives, they will have to write their own programming using tools like Codia or Scratch. I know lots of schools use Scratch for programming, you know? So Cargo Boot could be another possibility for it as an introduction, I mean. This is only available on iPad. So my next example, number 7, it's something that everyone loves, and this is something that I love as well. So it's the Kahoot, the so loved Kahoot. I'm sure that all of you guys know that. Kahoot is this, let's say, game-based learning platform that makes it super easy to play games and trivia quizzes, you know? I'm not sure if all of you know, but through a partnership between Cambridge and Kahoot, we now bring you some ready-made quizzes for you to use it with your students with content with some of our books. It is available, it is for free, and if you want to have access to it, please make sure you scan this QR code that you have it in this slide. Super interesting, like ready-made Kahoots, focus on lots of Cambridge books, course books for you. The next one, number 8, is Flubaroo. Flubero, it's not actually a program, but Flubero is actually an add-on, a software extension, let's say, that helps teachers grade assignments and assessments. So if you can get reports and analysis on your students' performance, on their scores, and send them in a very quick way, you can use the Flubero to do so. And my very last one, which is a super special one. In order to help you at this very and super challenging time, let's say, Cambridge brings together different ranges of support and resources in pieces of advice for you teachers. So Cambridge University Press, in partnership with Cambridge Assessment English, created this hub of information called Supporting Every Teacher Hub, aiming at really giving and providing you guys some support. So you may find blogs, online courses, free exam preparation materials. So there are so many things that you can find over there. And we have a different range of resources to support you during this time. So make sure you access cambridgetogether.org and just surf it and just go for it. So I'd like to show you the bibliography used for this presentation. The reference books are Interaction Online and the Cambridge Guide to Blended Learning for Language Teaching. I'd also like to give the credit for the photos and for all the photographers that made them available for use. I honestly hope you guys have enjoyed taking this time and sharing some knowledge with me. I apologize not for having my face over here. This presentation that I made was in Prezi, so I was very much afraid Prezi was just about to crash a lot. That's why I decided not to show the video and focus on the transition of the slides, because the animation, it's something so much more complex. And we have more than 200 people over here. So that's why I absolutely wanted to focus on the slide. Tech is a super vast world and full of new opportunities to learn and grow. I hope you guys now can be some techie savvy kind of people. So let's keep learning and building brighter futures together. This is my contact information in case you want to write to me and keep in touch. So whatever you feel that you need, feel free to write to me. Thank you all very much for being here. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I see you next time.